Hi, I'm Marie from wisdompreserved.life, and I wanted to show you the site of my new greenhouse. I'm building a greenhouse with reclaimed windows, and the first step for this is doing the foundation. So let me go ahead and show you what me and my husband did. The first step in making our greenhouse was to plan it all out, especially since we're using old windows, because the old windows, you know, they have specific sizes, they don't necessarily all match each other. So I had to sit down with some graph paper and figure out exactly how I was going to make this work. So then as soon as I knew what the footprint of it was, I could go ahead and mark out the ground so that I knew where I needed to cut in. And then it was time to pull off the sod and make my hole for my foundation. We've now marked the four corners of the greenhouse with some metal posts, and we went ahead and just put those into the ground. We made sure that they were completely square by putting up string in between the four of them, and then you measure 3 feet out on one side, 4 feet out on the other side, and then you measure between those 2 points, and it should be 5 feet in between those 2 points. And if that's the case, then that's supposed to mean that you're square, or at least get you pretty close to it. The other thing that we've done is we've cleared just around the edges, making it go all the way up to that string, because before it was kind of an approximate measurement, and now we know that it's exactly where we need it to be. We want it to be nice and tight because we're not going to use boards on the outside to keep the concrete in. We're actually going to use the dirt itself as part of our form. Additionally, we're going to need to stretch that string nice and tight and put a level on it and go ahead and make it nice and level. Now we are on a hill here, so because of that hill, we're gonna have to take some of the dirt from the top and put it to the bottom and just kind of play with it. We know that the top is gonna have to be at least 1 foot deep down, and then we'll have to make it work with the bottom as soon as we figure out exactly what level is. Additionally, we have the sprinkler that's right in the middle of our section, so that is going to have to be moved. Now that we have our string all level, the next thing for us to do is cut down from the string 14.5 inches, because the string is just a 1/2 inch above where our stem wall is going to go, and we want our stem wall to be 6 inches on top of a 6-inch deep footing. We'll go down the 14.5 inches, and then we want it to be 12 inches wide. So we're gonna make a little trench there that is the 12 inches wide. We ended up not recording the last little bit because we had a fair amount of discussion. This time we're doing I believe is a trench foundation. So we're using the dirt as our form. So we went ahead and went around and measured 14.5 inches from the string down around the whole way, dug our trench. Of course, on the upper part of the hill, the inside dirt is higher than our footing is going to be. So that's why we have these boards in there, because with those boards, what we're going to do is just make the ground level with that. And then further down the hill, where you can see the dirt isn't quite as deep, we will use it to figure out exactly how high up we are going to need to build that wall so that our trench will work. So sorry about the alpaca noise in the background there, but after getting one of those sides done, talking to my husband, starting to plan on getting the gravel, I realized I had forgotten the spacing for the gravel. So I've got little 2-inch wood spacers that I've created, and I'm gonna put under that little form that I've been using to hold back the dirt so that I can get it up to the 8 inches that I actually need in order to have space both for my gravel and for my footing. Now that we've got the trench dug as deep as we need to, and we've got the inside edges at the correct level, we're going to put in our 2 inches of gravel all around in the little trench. After some discussion, we decided that we need to actually do 4 inches of the gravel, and that we would make that footer level, instead of the 6 inches, which is quite thick, we would do it 4 inches. We felt like that would still be structurally sound enough, but not cost as much money, because the gravel, it's just not nearly as expensive as the concrete is. Plus, doing the concrete is quite a lot of work. So then what we have to do is we have to do 2 rows of the rebar along the bottom, and we need to connect them to each other, as well as supply a vertical stick going up that will stick out of the concrete right at the edges so that we can put our stem wall in. So we've got the 2 levels of rebar on the bottom, we have the one on the top, and then we also have the little pieces that will poke up. I know it's kind of hard to see in the pictures, but we've got them with the L shape there. And that will poke up into the stem wall, and that's what we have our 3rd round of rebar attached to. Now that we have the rebar in, we went ahead and built up our outside wall, because there were some areas that it wasn't tall enough, especially on the back side here. And it won't go up to the complete top there. We'll make the stopping point on the inside. For the first section, which is our footer, we already have the little ditch built for that. So now that we have our little retaining wall for the cement built, what we need to do is square it up to make sure that it doesn't bow out in the middle, that kind of a thing. And then we'll take some stakes and put them in there so that it doesn't move while we're actually doing our concrete pour, because there's a fair amount of pressure that can go against them from that. My recommendation with the rebar would be to have some kind of a brick or a spacer under it about 2 inches, so that it'll be halfway in the middle of your footer. And then I wouldn't actually add that top horizontal line until you are going to do your stem wall, because that was a little bit difficult to work around. Our next step is to create a form for our stem wall. Because of the fact that our rebar ended up going in a little bit more than we had wanted it to, we decided to do a 5-inch wide one, but 4-inch wide would be plenty. I mean, this would hold a building much larger than the size that we're putting on it, but it was easier for us than trying to fix the rebar. You know, we're doing things as cheaply as possible, which sometimes requires it to be more than you would think, because of course now we need to get more cement, but you know, there it goes. So if you take a look at the form that we made, we used all kind of funky little extra boards that were just scraps that we had laying around, and it worked out pretty well. But that being said, there were some little gaps down at the bottom, so what we did is we just put some gravel right up against the side so that there wouldn't be any gaps for the concrete to come out. And so now it's time for us to pour our concrete and then take off our forms. When we made the forms for the concrete stem walls, we made them our 6 inches high, and then we had a 7-inch spacer so that we could connect it to the wall and then out to the outside of a 2x4 that was on the inner wall. So we'd have our 5 inches there, and those spacers are what made it so we could make it a nice straight line and know that it was the same thickness the entire distance. It's been about a week since we did our concrete pour for the stem wall, and so we're ready to take the form off. We wanted to wait a little bit longer for this one just because it seemed like it was pretty wet for a while. After 7 days, you're at about 75% of the strength that your concrete will have after the full 28 days that it is hardened. Now what we're putting on it isn't incredibly heavy compared to what the concrete can tolerate, especially with it being a 5-inch thickness. We know that the bottom bulged out on the inside just a little bit, but we're not too worried about it because it should still be nice and level on top, and so it won't impact its stability at all. We've removed all of the boards, and we are so happy with how nice our stem wall looks. Nice and smooth, not too many bumps. The only one thing is where we put our braces across the top, there's some little divots there, but that's okay. Our pressure treated boards will just go right over it, not a big deal. Now that our foundation is done, it's time for us to start working on the framing. Now the first step is going to be to connect our pressure treated 2x4s to the concrete. These are the wedge anchors and drill bit that we'll be using. This one in particular calls for a 1/2 inch drill bit. It's got directions on the back side of it. I'll get some close-ups too so that you can see what we're doing as we put them in. After you're done drilling the hole, you'll need to vacuum out all the debris. Sometimes it can be nice to take maybe a flathead screwdriver and just kind of put it in there, make sure that all that dust is stirred up so that it can be vacuumed out, and double check your depth. The next step is to prepare our wedge anchors, and we do that by putting a washer and a nut on each one. The next step is to line up all of the holes on the boards with the holes that are in the concrete, and then you just hammer right down through the wood and into that hole that's in the concrete. In retrospect, we determined that we needed to build a little stem wall just so that we had something to build our interior wall on, because of the fact that we're leaving it gravel in the greenhouse portion. So we went ahead and built a little concrete form and then filled it up. We were able to kind of straddle the form and use a little tray to just kind of help fill it up, and we just had to get it level with the other stem wall. Thankfully, we were able to finish the foundation before it started to snow and get our framing done, and that is our next video. So keep an eye out for how to do the framing for the greenhouse.